Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
8:06 O'Connor and Company this Wednesday morning, your hump day entertainment. Coming up in 30 minutes, Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary, will tell us his opinion of Caroline Leavitt's debut yesterday. I'm pretty sure she's going to get a rave because she was phenomenal. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Joining us right now is Tristan Justice, national correspondent over there at the Federalist, one of those websites we love to check in on a regular basis. Also co-author of Fat and Unhappy, How Body Positivity is Killing Us and How to Save Yourself. Tristan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today will be the confirmation hearing for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, of course, was a Democrat. The Democrats kept him out of the primary process against against Joe Biden, ran as an independent, but then decided that he would have the best political influence on the election by joining forces with Donald Trump and spearheaded the Make America Healthy Again campaign. And that involves, well, looking at big agriculture, looking at additives in our food, looking at some of the priorities that we've had in terms of nutrition and the
Pharmaceutical
direction
industry.
that pharmaceutical industry, in a big way, the pharmaceutical industry. And now there are a lot of senators on both sides of the aisle who sort of have Kennedy in their crosshairs. And Tristan, if you could sort of lay out here, it's a very interesting combination of political interests who are lining up against RFK Jr. Does it really just boil down to the swamp and money and influence that these very, very rich and powerful interests have?
Well, any politician promising to take on big food and big pharma is going to make a lot of enemies on both sides of the aisle. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, I published a piece in the Federalist yesterday. The senators across the both committees that are going to be questioning Kennedy today and tomorrow have taken in more than $10 million from the pharmaceutical industry alone. And so I think Kennedy understands that he's not going to go to a friendly audience. He's going to face probably what's going to be a hostile hearing, just like some of the other more controversial nominees have faced. And you kind of see how he's taking flack from both the left and the right, including from a pro-life group. But it's interesting looking into that pro-life group, which is backed by Mike Pence. They've taken money from the pharmaceutical industry. So not always the most conflict of interest free there.
So it's a bit of you're saying that's a bit of a Trojan horse that they're utilizing pro-life concerns. I got to ask, listen, I still maintain that Donald Trump deserves the cabinet that he wants. He won the presidency. However, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said some, I believe, irresponsible things about autism, about concerns about links between autism and the pharmaceutical industry and vaccines. He has walked quite a bit of it back, but he hasn't been his own best friend here, has he, in terms of some of the more, I believe, irresponsible statements that he's made, Tristan?
Well, I think that's one of Kennedy's biggest challenges to confirmation. It's convincing senators that he's not anti-vaccine and that he's not going to do away with the polio vaccine or the measles vaccine.
Well, but the fact that that's even a question, I think,
right.
Julie, is sort of worth scrutiny.
Yeah, it is. But, I think why we're here, and certainly I have been pretty public in saying I have concerns about RFK, but why we're here is because of what we went through with COVID. And even people like me who are a little bit concerned are welcoming a disruptor in some of these agencies. Don't you think to some degree, Tristan, that that's what he is ultimately going to bring? I think he is loyal to President Trump. I don't think that he wants to walk in there and burn the whole thing down. But I do think he wants to disrupt what is going on. And HHS and NIH and all of these agencies are a mess.
I think Kennedy is the response to COVID that Americans slept on in the 2022 midterms.
Yep.
I think this last election, one of the most underappreciated storylines of this last election was the referendum on the lockdowns that Americans did not get in 2022.
Agreed.
And I think Kennedy is a big part of that.
Yep. Tristan, I wanted to ask your opinion on some of the criticism he's getting from his own mean family, Carolyn Kennedy Schlossberg, came out with this really aggressive she did a sort of a selfie video calling him a predator. And then Jack Schlossberg actually made fun of the legitimate problem that RFK has with his voice. What do you make of that? That's a really disgusting line of attack, first of all, from your own family, and then to make fun of one of his disabilities.
I think whenever a family member is doing something in public service, whether you agree with them or not, the best thing you can do is keep your criticism to yourself. So yeah. I understand that it's a political family, it's a prominent family, it's a very public family, but one can only imagine what their Thanksgiving dinners are like over there.
Well, and at least we finally have an answer to the burning question, what does a Kennedy have to do to be criticized by his family members? And now we've learned, support a Republican for president and be a part of a Republican cabinet. You know, you can kill, rape, all that other stuff, but, don't support a Republican. Tristan Justice is our guest with the Federalist. Robert Kennedy Jr. has also sort of vowed that he's going to have a rather specific focus as Health and Human Services Secretary. Do you have a good feel for that, Tristan, about what his priority is going to be and what his agenda might be as the new secretary?
Well, I think his priority is going to be re-examining a lot of the items on the generally recognized as safe list. There's about 3,000. It's a privatized list. It's been privatized for a few decades now. I think that's going to be top priority. I think he's going to go through and uncover some of the misconduct that we saw throughout the COVID pandemic, and I think he's going to want to do some type of transparency regulation on vaccines. Mm-hmm. Again, I think one of the challenges is going to be emphasizing to senators that this is not just a ploy for bipartisan votes, but there's genuine support there. But I think one of his challenges is going to be kind of staying in his own lane at HHS. I think Donald Trump's recent pick at the Department of Agriculture has kind of exposed the limits of his influence, considering that half the things he talks about don't really have anything to do with HHS and have more to do with the Department of Agriculture, such as performing food stamps and dealing with food subsidies.
Yeah. Tristan, what other, and again, I recognize that I saw a poll recently that among Trump supporters, Kennedy actually enjoys some of the highest support as a cabinet secretary. I think over 90% of Trump supporters like Kennedy and want him in this position. Although I still think some of the criticisms and concerns about him from a conservative perspective are valid. One of them is he's basically spent the greater part of his adult life as a trial lawyer suing interests and looking for big payouts. And there's some concern that he will be the trial lawyer's best friend there, that he's going to make it much easier for his former colleagues in that industry to sue and to get big payouts, which is not always a great thing from a conservative perspective. Mm.
But I also think Kennedy understands that he's going into a Republican administration and serving a Republican president who's deputized him to do certain things at HHS and not necessarily at EPA or the Department of Agriculture. And Trump's been pretty clear on don't touch the oil. We're going to be using it. We're going to open up Alaska and reclaim energy dominance, use our public lands. And so I think Kennedy is going into this understanding he's not going to be the pro-abortion Democrat at HHS that he might have a year ago, but instead he's going to be the pro-life HHS secretary from Trump's first term.
Who are you going to be watching, real fast, Tristan, as you watch the hearings today, who are you going to keep your eye on? Who do you think is sort of going to be maybe a game-changing senator in terms of their approach to this?
I would keep an eye on Senator Cassidy, considering he is a senator who's been the most vocal against Kennedy recently, and he is the second highest recipient of contributions from the pharmaceutical industry across both committees.
Funny how those two things go hand in hand. All right, we'll leave it there. Tristan Justice, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And
just real quick,
Kennedy
Senator Cassidy. Senator Cassidy is also a medical doctor. He's also a doctor, so he might have. I get the contribution issue, but they're going to give to a doctor.
It's not a cut and dry thing here. It really isn't. That's why it requires a good, thoughtful conversation like we just had, and I think honest analysis. Sure. I said it at the time. When Kennedy endorsed Trump, I said, I think this is the game changer. This is going to, and I do. I think that history has borne that out. And if having Kennedy and his perspective as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, if that's the trade-off to have Kamala Harris nowhere near the Oval Office, and have Donald Trump be the president of the United States and everything that comes along with it, I make that trade. I'm
100%,
fine with it.
because we're not David
But
French.
that doesn't mean but that doesn't mean we check our brain at the door. It doesn't mean we don't look at this and recognize the concerns. And we're looking at those concerns, and we'll continue to look at the concerns.
Such a healthy,
I think that our listeners expect
sane
that.
perspective, Larry. That's very good.
It is